for the high sign from the control room. Hello again, everyone. Thank you for staying, for remaining. I was asked to introduce our speaker. My first response, I think I've said this before, is he doesn't need any introduction because I think most of you all know him. But in case you don't, it's a great honor and privilege to introduce the Reverend Dr. Frank Wade, who is one of our priest's associate here at Emmanuel. He's many other things as well. Husband of Carrie. Priest for many, many years. I can't tell you all that he's done and continues to do, even in retirement. But I can just say, I'm glad he's here today. So welcome.
I am the husband of Carrie and the father of Jennifer, so I want to cover those bases. We're talking today about the role of faith in troubling times, and what I'd like to do is kind of two sections. The first is to take care of some untruths about the role of faith and what faith provides in troubling times. And I want you to be a little liberal in thinking about what troubling times are. Troubling times can be grief, troubling times can be pain, troubling times can be all kinds of things. So there's lots of ways that trouble shows up, as you know. So be generous in your understanding of that. And so to begin, I'd like to talk with you about some of the things that are not true. And one of the things that is not true is our capacity to produce scheduled miracles. And that there are lots of people who try to do that. There's a story that I enjoy a lot, about a man who went to his pastor and he said he had terrible financial problems, just awful. I mean, I've got no money and the demands and people are everything is just terrible. And the pastor said, well, what I want you to do is go home, close your eyes, open the Bible, put your hand on it, and open your eyes, and that'll be God's answer to your problems. Okay. So about a month later, the pastor is walking down the street, and he sees the guy coming. He's got a spring in his step. He's got on a new suit. He's looking sharp and good. He says, Pastor, I just want to thank you for that wonderful advice. I mean, it worked perfectly. He said, I went home, I closed my eyes, I opened the Bible, I put my finger down, and I looked where it said, and it said chapter 11. And I thought, there you go. That's how I solved it. That's the solution to all my problems. And so, it was, there you. I mean, but it may work from time to time. But it is not. I believe in miracles, but I certainly don't rely on them. They are an unsteady way to solve problems. So when you say that, in troubling times, I'm going to wait for a miracle, that's not a particularly fruitful thing to do. A second kind of mythology that we have about that is that God will protect us, that God will protect me. We make a connection between the love of God and God's protection. And if you will remember, among the temptations of Jesus after his baptism, the first was that he would become a social agency and feed all the hungry people, and the third one was that he would take political power and control all the political forces. But the second one was that God would protect him. And it reads that then the devil took him, Jesus, to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. If you are the Son of God, he said, throw yourself down. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. And Jesus answered him, it is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. So the temptation was, God loves me, God's going to take care of me. In Jesus' case, okay, I'm the Son of God, so God is going to take care of me. God won't let anything bad happen to me. And that's a pervasive temptation, because if you will remember, later in Jesus' life, he succumbs to that temptation. In Gethsemane, while he's praying, he says, what's plan B? Let's see what, let's do something other than this crucifixion thing. Protect me, get me out of this. And the answer was no. The answer was no. It is a great temptation, a powerful temptation, that if God loves me, God will protect me and not let anything bad happen to me. It is well supported by our ambitions, not well supported by experience. The fact remains that we are fragile people and we live in a dangerous world. Good people like us suffer. 28,000 of them dead in Turkey and Syria. Add to that the ones who are injured, and add to that the ones who are grieving, and you get a dimension of it. Frankly, if Christianity were about protection, if the idea of being a Christian was to be protected, I would say that the cross is a pretty poor logo for a protection society. So it's not what we have. The third is theodicy. Theodicy is a Greek word that means justice, and it means explaining the ways of God in the world. So let's get a theory up about why was there an earthquake for all those people. And so, well, it's because they behaved badly in the Syrian. No, I mean, that just doesn't wash. It's the assumption behind theodicy is that there is a logical explanation for pain and for suffering. The way that it shows up in most of our lives is the quick response, what did I do to deserve this? Okay, now again, there are miracles. God does, care for us and intervene. We pray for other people. There is, sometimes that protection happens. But what did I deserve to do this? Sometimes, the evidence is obvious. You ate too much and your heart, you're sick. There you are. You drank too much and there you go. I mean, the thing is obvious. But the assumption that there is a this directly connected to a that to explain all evil doesn't hold together. It is sometimes true, but not always, and not enough. Ian Markham wrote a book called Understanding Christian Doctrine. And in a book with the title, Understanding Christian Doctrine, he says, quote, "We simply cannot work out why God allows evil and suffering." So in a book that bears the brave title of the Understanding Christian Doctrine, there's the admission that we don't understand that at all. There is no theodicy. There is no way to do it. In the creation in the creation story in Genesis, the snake is just there. It doesn't say how he got there. It doesn't say who put the snake there. It doesn't say anything about the snake except the snake is there. And that's the reality. Suffering and trouble are here. So, having destroyed your faith pretty completely as we go along, so now what can we say? Well, a couple of things I think we can understand. One is I think this is obvious when you think about it, but the fact is that trouble and faith pull us in opposite directions. Trouble and faith pull us in opposite directions. Trouble is powerfully self-centering. Trouble turns us inward. Anxiety, loss, all of these things are self-absorbing. It's about me. My illness, my concern, my fear, my whatever, and the world begins to just become very small inside of me. Faith, on the other hand, is persuasively other-centered. Faith is a turning outward. We're called upon to love God, to love neighbor before ourselves. Faith is self-giving. It is about being oriented outwardly. if you were to take try to make a bumper sticker out of the gospel, which is a risky thing to do, but you could say that Jesus calls us to live outwardly, generously, to the point of vulnerability. That's the faith. But trouble pulls us the other way. And so there is that dichotomy, that different power in those two experiences. So when we talk about the role of faith in troubling times, one of the first response is the role of faith in troubling times is to pull us out of ourselves, is to pull us out, to move us in a new direction. Another way to think of it is that the consistent experience of God in our lives is twofold. That consistently, God provides people like you and me with two things that are an experience of God. The first is guidance. The second is strength. Guidance is always there. What does the Lord require of you, says Micah. Well, you know what the Lord requires of you. Come on. What is it but to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God? You know that. What are the fruits? They're love and mercy and kindness and generosity. They are turning outward. That's the answer. That's the guidance that we've got. And it applies differently in different situations, but the message is the same. The guidance is always there, saying, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. So I got all kinds of trouble. What am I supposed to do? Well, do justice. Love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. Be self-giving. That's the answer. That's the guidance, and it's always there. The difficulty, or the companion to that, is the strength to follow the guidance. And one of the differences spiritually in the experience of those two things is that guidance is always there, and strength is only there when you start to use it. I've often thought that, I know what I'm supposed to do, and I would like to be overwhelmed with the sense of my ability to do it. Well, no. But my experience, and the experience of many of our faith, is when you start to do it, the strength is there. The strength is there. It shows up. It's there when you start to use it. Guidance is always there. Strength is there when we start to use it. So the 23rd, I want you to think about the 23rd Psalm for a minute. Because people in times of trouble often say, well, I want the 23rd Psalm. I want to listen to the 23rd Psalm. And, people always want the 23rd Psalm in a funeral, and which I think is great. It's a wonderful thing to do. But you realize that the Psalm is addressed to grief, not death. It's people in the valley of the shadow of death, not in death itself. So this is about the trouble of grieving, but it applies to the trouble of, all sorts of things that we get in trouble for. So the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. They're outside of ourselves. He leads me beside still waters. Still water for a sheep is easier to drink than running water. That's what that means. I could do this. You could do this. He restores my soul. But then it says, he leads me in the path of righteousness. Leads me in the path of righteousness. That's guidance. He leads me in the path of righteousness outwardly. And though I've walked through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. God is with you. And then it says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now, I teach here at the seminary, and I teach homiletics now in terms of how to preach at a baptism, a wedding, and a funeral. And the students are always fond of saying, as a sign of courage and care, God is with you. And it drives me crazy. I say, you're going to say, God is with you? So's the devil. So's dandruff. I mean, for God's sake, you haven't said anything if you say that God is just hanging around. Well, what's he doing? Well, the Psalm says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now, what does a shepherd do with a rod and a staff? whacks the sheep. That's what it does. No, you go over here, dummy. Come on, it's over this way. And it's like, you get the sheep to go where you're going to go. And they comfort me. Comfort in the Bible is a word that means strengthen. The comfortable words that we used to have is in Rite One and in the prayer book. The comfortable words are the strengthening words. They're meant to strengthen us. That's the guidance and strength, rod and staff. They comfort me. That's what's provided in there. And so the guidance is always there in times of trouble. And the guidance applies differently. The guidance when you are grieving for the death of somebody that you really love, when you're facing a difficult relationship that needs to be worked on or straightened out, the application is different, but the guidance remains the same, and the strength to do it is there. The fact is, we cannot avoid trouble in our lives. We can, however, remain faithful in times of trouble, and that's what's given to us. And I'd like to tell you that there's a way to schedule a miracle, and we're going to do that. Churches are very fond. Well, I don't think we do it here, but they say, oh, we have a faith budget. That's an unbalanced budget. Come on. It means you're talking about spending money you haven't got, and you think God's going to provide it. Well, anyway, it's really, picking on the church is like hunting heifers. It's just not interesting. It's so easy to do. But the idea of counting on a miracle, I wish you could, but you can't. Miracles, by their very definition, are not reliable. Protection. God does care for us, and that care shows up in a variety of ways, but it does not make us anything other than fragile people in a dangerous world. And the idea of theodicy, that we can explain all this, there are people who are always jumping up ready to explain all this and make it go away, and it never holds together. What God provides us with are two things: guidance and strength. Those things are provided in times of trouble, and for most of us here should know they're also provided in times of not trouble. But that's not the topic they gave me. We can talk about that some other time. But I'm going to open up and see if we have any conversation that we'd like to have. Amy's got the microphone there. Rick has a hand up over here. Rick, right over here on this side.
Well, the troubles that you're talking about seem to be personal troubles. Does this also apply to society's troubles?
Okay.
Guidance and strength.
Pointing out
society.
societal troubles like homelessness and all that kind of thing. I would say it's that the answer is the same. That when you talk about God's guidance for a corporate body, whether we talk about a congregation or a community or a nation, state, whatever, remains pretty consistently the same. That the Micah, do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. That's what we're supposed to be doing. When you get to it, you get to some really difficult, intractable problems. Like, for example, take the immigration situation on our southern border, and we have lots of anxiety about that, and we're worried about that. And people will point out, well, as a nation, we have a right and a responsibility to protect our borders. That's true. But we are citizens of the kingdom of God, and it has no borders. So we have a responsibility that exceeds that of simple national security. Now, that doesn't contain a solution, but it says, yeah, you got to go that way. You can't just hide behind that. We can't do that. The guidance of God, I think, in that particular case, is that we need to be proactive about responding to the people of God. And I think that that's God's guidance, and I think the strength is there. That would be one example, but there are all kinds of other societal issues. But I think the answer remains the same. You're right. The examples I used were personal ones, but I think it applies in both cases. Jim has a hand up right here.
Regarding the staff and rod.
Regarding
the staff and rod in the Psalm 23, doesn't the shepherd also use his crook to ward off dangers and also to lift the lost sheep out of crevices
Yes.
and danger.
Yeah, okay. The point is, doesn't the shepherd also use the crook to protect the sheep? And that's true. And I think God does protect us. But in order to understand that, you'd almost have to make a list of all the things that didn't happen. Well, that's a little tough, to say, well, people, they always kid clergy about being responsible for the weather, when we're having a picnic or something like that. And so when it rains or something, I say, well, you ought to see what was scheduled for today. This is better than what was on the books. There's no way to do that, to say, how, what didn't happen. But yes, that's true. And I think that God does protect us. Part of it is guidance and strength, but I think the protection is there. But I don't know what didn't happen, and that's the part of it. Yeah, Eileen.
Thank you, Frank. You say the snake is ever present.
The what?
The snake, evil is
Yes.
ever present.
Right.
What does our theology say about the role of evil in triggering attention to that guidance and that strength? Does it have a role, or is that stretching it?
Okay. The question is, what is the role, and what is the role of that snake in our dealing with that snake? That would move us into if you took that too far, you'd end up in theodicy, trying to justify the ways of God. One of the things that I could say about it, and I don't want this to stand as if this were the only thing to say, because you can't go too far with it, is that the struggle with good and evil is the arena in which we define ourselves as moral human beings. Okay, it is, one of the things that makes us moral human beings, or human beings and therefore moral people, is our ability to choose principle over instinct. So that when the instinct of trouble makes us come in on ourselves, we have the moral power to choose to behave otherwise in terms of principles. And that's the existence of good and evil, trouble in all of its forms, natural trouble like the earthquake, trouble we get into on our own, all that kind of stuff. Whatever else it may be, it is the arena in which we define ourselves as moral human beings. That much we can say. Now, I think if you begin to say, well, could something else have been worked out? I don't know, but that gets into theodicy, and that's where we start to fall apart. But that part I do know. It is the arena in which we define ourselves as moral human beings, choosing in the examples I gave here to live faithfully, outwardly, generously, as opposed to frightened, pulled in like that in the face of evil. And it's all around. Yes, ma'am. There's a hand. Oh, there's a hand back here, ma'am.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for this. So I'm going to first share a quick snippet of my first theological question in life, which is, why should we not want God? And I couldn't get the answer to it, and people didn't understand where that question came from, and it was, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Why shouldn't we want God? So maybe insightful in times of trouble. I think maybe we don't look to God, and so maybe it was more insightful than one can do. But thank you for that.
Thank you. That's good.
So beyond that, what I'm thinking of is faith and trouble, if they're opposing forces. So this is probably a weak theological question too, but if they're opposing forces, are they on some kind of, could we see them as on a continuum where we try to get more kind of a balance of more faith, but the trouble pulls us? And does that make even any sense? And what do you think of that? Instead of being 100% faithful, well, let me bring as much faith as I can, even though I have this trouble to deal with.
Okay, about, that I'm repeating this for the people who are streaming it, and make sure I get this right, that it's, since trouble and faith pull us in opposite directions, is it possible to be 100% on the faith side? And Randy quoted it today, be ye perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. So that's the bar, and that's where we're supposed to be. And the reason we come out here every week is because we aren't. That we are a people who do not achieve that on our own, and we can't do it on our own. So we are part of a community of faith and a community of forgiveness, and all of those dynamics that gather around that. The pull of faith and trouble is part of the way that you and I experience it. So if that's for me, I'm busy. That if it's that they they pull us, it's our experience of it. So it in a way it would be like a pull of gravity, or I don't have a good example in my head. So, but to be 100% faithful, that's where we're headed. That's not where we get, and that's why we're here working on it, and that's why we do that. We certainly know people who have succumbed totally to the pressures of their troubles, who just kind of collapse entirely on themselves and kind of disappear into themselves. So, but that's not very common either. But so they're there, but I don't think we can go 100% in either place. And this lady had a hand up. This lady right here. Yes, ma'am.
I've been told that our troubles are gifts from God to help us grow as human beings. I've also been told that trouble just happens, it just exists. Is there a way to square that? And you also have said, we can't work out why bad things happen to good people. It just happens. Things just happen.
Right.
And it's our job to determine how we're going to deal with the troubles that beset us.
It is. So the question is it that the trouble is there? Can we say the trouble is there in order to make us stronger people or something like that? I think that if you took that sentence and just tried to make that your, put it on the sign over your desk or something like that, it would be too complete, and it would be like an attempt at theodicy. That the reason I don't think that the earthquake in Turkey solved anybody's problem there. I don't believe that. I mean, that's a kind of trouble in our life. I think that people who are born with a predilection towards very, very difficult behaviors, whether it's addictive behaviors or compulsive behaviors, something like that, I don't think that's there to straighten them up or something like. I don't believe that. But I also don't have a way of saying why it's there. I want to come back to what I said to Eileen, that I don't know. I can't answer it, and neither can Ian Markham, which comforts me, and that I cannot answer it. But I do know that this is the world in which I live, and I have to. This is how I figure out how to be a moral human being, is in this context. Okay, and in a way, it's like, well, I mean, there's a kind of a parallel. There are people say, well, I'm an American. Here I am an American, but I don't want to be an American with the bad history that we're remembering. I'm sorry. If you could, back in West Virginia, when you talk about those are the fleas that come with the dog. It's the whole thing. So it all goes together. I can't explain it, one might learn and grow from trouble, but that's not the reason for trouble. Okay, if I can. Wendy?
I am always amazed at people like Lenny Skutnik, who many will remember was a bystander at the 14th Street Bridge in 1979 when an Air Florida flight just went into the water. And he was on the sidelines. A few of the flight attendants swam to the surface, and without even thinking, he jumped in and saved whoever he could.
Right.
And then there was a lady recently on Metro who wrested a gun away from somebody.
Yeah.
That seems to be beyond instinct. It seems to be, and I'm interested in a reflection on that. They always catch your attention, and you always say, what would I do? Lift up the car off somebody, and they get the strength to do it. So it's more of a reflection, but
No, I understand. The question is, what about the incredible acts of bravery and self-sacrifice that come upon people? I mean, they're obviously there, and my guess is if you had asked the people that you named and cited the day before those incidences, they wouldn't have known the answer to that either. That the person who's walking around saying, come on, give me a plane crash. I'm in. I'm ready to go. And, those folks are dangerous. But I think that that we are capable of that. I think that somewhere in those people's lives, the story has been told with great force that was a thing to do. That it wasn't just, well, look after yourself, take care of yourself, that's their problem, not yours. That somewhere there that word was given. But I obviously don't know, but it's an impressive thing. So, okay, are we done? Who's going to win the Super Bowl? Huh? Okay. All right, we got one more over here, Amy, and then we're on our way, I think. Okay. Amy, Eileen up here. Amy to Eileen. Yeah.
Speaking too much, and maybe the answer to this is rhetorical, but would you like to speak anew to what you see as some of the best ways for us to strength?
To build strength? Well, I think again, like to hold up the models, like I was saying to Wendy, that somebody told these people that was a good thing to do, that was and so owning those stories about what's the right way to that picture of that which is generous and outward and giving. That I've made the point that we are moral human beings because of our ability to choose principle over instinct. But you got to have the principle there to choose. So holding up those principles, it's a little plug here, but that's what's one of the things that's valuable about church. Church is where the stories are kept. This is where the principles are sung and said and prayed and modeled over and over again. It's not the only place in the world for it, but it's one of the places, and I think that's a good way to do it. But you have to do that with you have to know the principles, and then to know that it really can be done, and that people do those things. And I think telling those stories and owning those stories is really important. Okay, so we are done at that. Okay, thank you, my friends. We're done.